Okay, so this is going to be a guide on how to actually use the module, the deployment module that I have written and published. It's assumed that you've already published the module and deployed it out to all of your computer systems. There will be another tutorial on here on how to publish it and where to install it on other computer systems so that it can be easily recognized and you can do a simple import dash module. That will come on another tutorial though. So the first thing we're going to do here is take a look at this install template that I've designed. This is typically what I use when I am getting ready to push software out. The first thing you want to do here is you want to, of course, import your module. The second thing is set the variables from this initialize variable function. Now, I've written a function in the module that basically you come up here to the global variables and you input into an array here each variable that you want in this. And then what it does is it uses a for each statement and it uses the set dash variable dash name, and then it parses through this and assigns each one of these entries in here to that dash name variable in the set dash variable function. That way, number one, you've only got one line here and you have all your variables within this array and you're not taking up a whole bunch of codes a line in here, because it just kind of, after a while, it can junk it up, especially if you have a lot of different variables to declare. So, and then your other part of the set variables is to set your scope. And of course, these are global, so you can put global. You can put local in there also if you're using this inside another function. The next thing, you want to actually initialize the variables, and that's calling this function right here. What you're going to do is you're going to go through. I have personally named it build.csv. The reason that's my main build document, and then it contains each entry of each app. So let's say installing in a build .NET Framework, Microsoft Office, Adobe Photoshop, and so on. So you're going to the build CSV. If it's a successful one, each one of those will be entered into that document. Now you'll see the screenshot back on my blog, that very first screenshot that I put in there, where it has like number 1, and I believe it was .NET Framework, and then number 2, 3, and so on. And that's how you sequence these through. So basically you leave this one alone. The only part you would really change is if you want this log put in a different location. Next thing here, the build errors, you leave that to null, because and when it begins, the installation script here begins, you want the error set to null, because there's going to be no errors yet. The log file, you'll definitely want to set this. The only part of the log file that you'll need to change is this part right here, the application name. Call it whatever you want. Typically, this is just my own standard. Like if I'm installing Adobe Photoshop, I'll type in literally Adobe Photoshop. The next thing here, these are the 3 values that I use: base build, final build, and software development. Software deployment. Base build is when you're building your golden image. Final build is when you're actually building a machine to be deployed. You're laying your golden image down and then running your final set of installations. And then software deployment is just when I'm actually just pushing the software out. That's what this whole script and module were written for, is to be able to install applications in any scenario you want. The relative path, you leave that blank. That basically grabs the path at which this script was executed from. The sequence, now this is the part when you go back to the into my blog, look at the very first screenshot, you'll see those sequence numbers. Well, you number these out, and this is mainly for applications getting installed in a build. It's worked great for me because it makes a really quick, easy, concise document to go back to and see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on down the list, like was shown in that picture in this blog entry. That's how easy it is to go through and check. And I just put a pause in my golden image and have it suspend the image there. I just open this CSV document. This is what's inserted in here in the build CSV. Open that up and bam. It's easy to look I think we have 29 apps that get installed here, the firm I work at. The next thing is your global title. That is basically that renames the PowerShell console window. All that does. Now, I will tell you this. You will error out in this script if you don't change this and this, or this. The reason you'll error out is the brackets are unrecognized characters. So when it tries to actually write, let's say this bracket application name close bracket .log, those brackets can't be written to the OS. So this script will error out if you don't populate those. If it's just a typical application I'm installing and it's not going in the build, what I do is I just totally delete this out and just use quote. There's no reason you don't need a task sequence number. That's strictly, like I said, for only when you're making this for a installation in a golden image or a final image. All right, so the first thing here, after you do the initialize variables, then I always have it set the console title. That's another function that is in the actual module, and grabs your global title right here that you assigned. The new log file, that's the next thing you want on here. The new log file basically goes in. It makes sure that this log file is there. It's generated. It makes sure the directory structure is also there. So you definitely need to run that next. The Git architecture and Git OS version, I keep those in there just because the fact Git architecture basically returns the value of 32-bit or 64-bit. Git OS version, that returns the actual version of Windows that you're running, like 6.1, for instance. And the next line right here, that line is, you just delete this line out, and that's where all your different functions would go in if you're going to install an application. Let's say you're going to install, so we're going to delete this, going to put a couple spaces in there, and let's say I'm going to install dash, as you can see already right here, you can see I already have my deployment module in there, and it automatically recognized the different commands like install MSI, install fonts, executable, MSU, MSP. So let's say I'm going to install an MSI. You do dash, the display name. I'm going to call it Adobe Acrobat just to use it as a, and then you do dash, MSI, and I'm just going to make up something, which basically, one trick here is that I use, and that's where this global relative path up here comes in handy, is I can do global relative path, and bam, if the MSI is in the same folder as this, the global relative path automatically maps that to there, and then I'm going to do my switches, and that's typically like /QB minus. One too many of those, and bam. So one thing I'm going to put in there this time as an example, write the log file. Basically what happens is, okay, in your, since I use install-MSI as an example, in there it's actually taking the variables, it's got a couple of variables in there. It's basically one looking to see if there were any errors. That's what up here your global errors does. If there was an error during the installation, it will increment that to a 1. And if global errors does not equal null or 0 when it goes to the right log file, then the entry into the build.csv will not occur. And basically it's a failed installation. Your other log file, now there are 2 log files that this writes. There's your build.csv log file, which basically is a log of each application that gets installed. This is basically every script that you run, install script for each app, it appends to that build.csv. Now, your other log file, this log file right here, that's the individual log file that goes through, and basically each screen, you'll see in my second screenshot in the blog, each screen, or each activity within the script is documented. Like for instance, let's say in that that screenshot that I had, I'm using Workshare as an example. All right, you see in that screenshot there's a whole bunch of different functions. Well, each one of those is written to that log file. So you can open that log file right up and see exactly what happened during the installation. If there's even a worse problem and you see there are failures, now there's another log file that gets written inside the MSI. Like for instance, in install.msi, it automatically pulls the name that's being used here. It pulls that name and it writes to an actual, it tells the MSI to write a log file under that name, and also, so that way you've got a detailed log besides this step-by-step log that gets written from the PowerShell script. And then finally, your exit PowerShell, what that does is it goes through if there were errors in this, it will the global this one right here, the global errors, if that is not null or 0, then when it runs this exit PowerShell, what will happen is it'll exit out on an error code 1. Otherwise, what's going to happen is even if you have like the installed MSI, if it fails, it's not going to report the error code back upon exiting out of the PowerShell script. The reason here I'll let you know the reason I'm not grabbing the last exit code from the MSI and other functions in there is this. What if you're installing multiple MSIs? You know, you're only going to be able to exit out with one error code. So that's why I decided I'm just going to call it an error code 1. Then if it is an error code 1, it goes ahead and immediately exits out of PowerShell, and these last 2 lines right here get omitted. It never gets to those. If it was a successful install and it was the last exit code was either 0, or I'm sorry, the global errors was either 0 or null, it just goes ahead, goes through this one, and then it proceeds to remove all the variables. This is basically the same thing as the set variables up here. It's basically the same thing as that, except it goes through and disposes of them. It does the remove dash variable. And then finally, it unloads the deployment module. Well, that's basically, in a nutshell, how to actually use the module. If you have any questions, definitely let me know. I'll get one of my actual installation scripts that I've written for one of our apps here. I'll publish that out there with the blog also, and to give you an example of exactly how I'm using it. So there'll be another podcast coming up here. I'm going to push out. Basically, it will be telling you the tips and tricks on how to get this to a module to actually work. Took me some time here to actually get it because where I was having the problem was in our build process, and I'll get further into that on how to actually get it installed in there, get everything set up and configured to where you can be using these installation scripts right off the start in a build, especially when you're building a golden image. Well, if you have any questions, definitely just post them on my blog down there, and I try to get back to them as soon as I can. All right. Thank you.